Hi, bee fans. Some of you know that I'm a geography professor. I'm not a bee professor, but I have been keeping bees in the backyard for about 15 years. So this lecture series is kind of like a series of student presentations about what I've learned from the bees over the past 15 years. So the first thing is what's going on inside of a hive. Before I talk about that though, one of the questions that I get a lot is this insect a bee? What I'm talking about are European honeybees, this little guy with the heart next to him. This is the bee that we use for pollinating a lot of our crops. They live in large colonies, and these bees can only sting one time because when they sting you, they die. You can see here there's a lot of other insects that look a lot like bees, things like bumblebees or carpenter bees. A yellow jacket is one insect that gets confused with honeybees a lot, but definitely not a honeybee. Their behavior is really different, and you can also see that there's some differences in how they appear. Another thing is that honeybees rarely or never build nests in the ground. If you have bees, or what you think might be bees, flying up and out of a hive that's underground, it's probably not a honeybee. It could be a wasp or some other kind of insect. In fact, we have a lot of bees in North America, and this graphic just gives you a sense of how diverse native honeybees are in North America. It's also important to keep in mind that our honeybees that we love so much are actually not native. They're all from European honeybee stock. So if you're watching the outside of a hive, this is what you see. A lot of bees coming and going, some bringing in pollen, most probably bringing in nectar, and they're very busy. But what you don't see until you open the hive is this. This hive is a very healthy hive with tens of thousands of bees in it. This is what's called a Langstroth hive, which are the wooden bee boxes. And inside each one of those wooden boxes, there are 10 frames where the bees build honeycomb to store pollen and nectar, and also where they lay eggs to raise baby bees. So what I want to do is kind of talk through the different types of bees that are in a hive. The first bee I want to talk about is the queen bee. You can see her in this picture. She has the red dot on her back. That's not natural, by the way. That was put there by the breeder that we bought her from. She's a commercial queen. You can see that her body, her abdomen is really long compared to the other bees. And that's so that she can stick her butt into a honeycomb cell to lay an egg. There's only one queen in each hive, and she's the only one that lays eggs. So she is really important for the health and longevity of the hive because she's the only one that can make baby bees. She typically only leaves the hive once during her lifetime, and that's to go on a mating flight. So she will leave the hive on a mating flight and mate with multiple drones, and she keeps the sperm that she collects separate from the eggs. And when she's laying an egg, she will fertilize an egg to create a female worker bee. And if she doesn't fertilize the egg, then that creates a male worker bee. So she actually controls the sex distribution of the hive in terms of the ratio of male to female bees. What's even more interesting, though, is that she's probably not the one making that decision. What I've read is that it's the workers who really help her to make that decision. They guide her through the hive and sort of indicate to her what cells she should lay eggs in. And the worker bees are also the ones that build the honeycomb. And a worker bee cell, a female bee cell, is smaller than a male bee cell. I'll show you in a minute the size difference between the two sexes of bees. So the queen knows that if she's in a worker bee sized cell, that she needs to fertilize the egg and lay a female bee, whereas if she's in a larger cell, that she should not fertilize the egg and lay a male bee egg. Queens will live for maybe 2 or 3 years. After their egg laying production starts to decline, the workers will actually replace the queen. So she'll lay an egg, and the workers will feed that egg a specific blend of of nectar and pollen called royal jelly. Actually, all bees get royal jelly, but future queen bees get kind of special treatment to turn them into queens. And then they may actually kill the old queen, let the new queen emerge. She'll go on her mating flight, and the hive will continue to exist. I mentioned that worker bees are females. This is actually a honeycomb we call a nursery. All of these honeycomb cells are where worker bees are hatching out. So you can see they're capped with wax, and the bee that's right in the middle of this photo is emerging out of a cell. So when the queen lays an egg, the eggs are kind of immersed in this mixture of royal jelly and other food. And then when they get to a certain size, those cells will be capped to allow the bee to finish developing. And then when they're done, they emerge, they chew their way out and emerge just like this bee is doing here in the middle. Worker bees, again, are all female, and female bees usually make up 90 to 95% of the population in the hive. And they work their entire lives. The first thing they do when they emerge from their cell, like the bee just to her right is doing, is clean out the cell that they were just in. So they clean up after themselves and make that cell ready either for nectar storage or for another egg to be laid into it. And then usually when they first emerge, they become nurse bees. So they sort of take care of the honey, the eggs and the larvae. As they grow older, they might go up into other positions in the hive. There's bees that specialize in cleaning out the hive. There's bees that specialize in guarding the entrances of the hive. Eventually, worker bees will graduate into forager bees, where they will leave the hive on a regular basis to go out and collect honey and pollen and bring that back into the hive. And again, worker bees work their whole lives. During the summertime, their lives can be really short because they work so hard, especially after they start to go out for foraging, maybe just 3 or 4 weeks. But over the wintertime, they will live longer and overwinter in the hive with the queen. This is a male bee or a drone. You can see him right in the middle of this image. What you notice right away is that he's kind of bigger and fatter and rounder than his sisters are. He also has enormous eyes. Drone bees don't have stingers, so they can't sting you. And their only function really is to mate with virgin queens. Drones don't do any work in the hive. Their sisters groom them and feed them. And during the day, they may leave the hive and go out and wait for a virgin queen to fly by. And then if a virgin queen does fly by and they are fortunate enough to mate with her, they will actually die in the process of mating with the virgin queen. So if a drone is successful in carrying out his duty, then he lives fast and dies young. If he doesn't succeed in that, then he kind of gets coddled and taken care of by his sisters throughout the summer. But then in the fall, he's actually booted out. In the fall, all of the drones in a hive, or most of them, are pushed out of the hive by their sisters because their sisters don't want to take care of these drones over the wintertime. So it's called the massacre of the drones, and it's a pretty sad thing that happens every fall. But ultimately, these drones can't be taken care of all winter, consuming valuable honey stores that their sisters and the queen and the emerging bees for next spring require. This is a photo that kind of shows a nursery frame. And so these are capped cells where baby bees are emerging. You can see the smaller cells are the worker cells, and the larger cells near the lower half of the frame, those are the drone cells. So again, the drone cells are actually built bigger. And so that's how the queen knows whether or not to lay a male bee or a female bee egg. So this is a graphic that kind of sums up the size and appearances of the female worker, the queen, and the drone bees. And that's just a little snapshot of what is happening inside of a hive.